Welcome to Quilts and Other Happy Accidents. I'm Sherry. I'm really glad you popped in today because I'm kind of on a break right now. Um, I'm going to cover a lot of ground in today's video. I'm going to bring you up to date on the travel with Mother and Dad. We're going to talk about some of the projects that I'm just now finishing up. Boy, have they been piling up fast. And then I want to show you what I finally decided to do with those Wonky Log Cabin blocks. I think you'll see that they're pretty wonky still. Anyway, so the trip with Mother and Dad was thankfully uneventful. No bad weather, no construction. It's just so dang long. To drive from Phoenix to Kansas City, I was glad to be home. There is no place like home. Click, click. And as soon as I got home, I had to get back to work because construction's going to start on the kitchen this week. So I'm emptying out my kitchen, which means going through cabinets. Where does all this stuff come from? I mean, holy guacamole. So, been making extra trips to Goodwill and sorting things and getting rid of things. Yeah, I don't know where it all comes from or why I thought I needed it when I got it, but anyway, we're cutting back, and I'm sorry to say we'll probably start over, but whatever. More importantly, I get a new kitchen, and I'm really excited for that. One of the projects that I finally finished up was that charity quilt that I made um, several months ago. The Quilt As You Go. I'll put a picture here for you because it turned out really, really well. And all I needed to do was bind it. I don't know why it took me all this time to get around to binding it, but it's done, it's signed, it's ready to go. The next one I started working on was the rail and strips. I decided to go with the fleece on the back and just to make it a blanket rather than a quilt. It's going well. Fleece just makes so much dust, but it is going quickly, and I should be able to get it bound and done maybe even today. But what I'm most excited to talk to you about is that Wonky Log Cabin block that I did. Remember when I threw the rules out and I did it my way? Well, thank all of you for watching that video. I'm surrounded by a bunch of quilting rebels, I can tell. Show you one of the blocks, and then I'll walk you through some of the challenges I had in putting it together to make the quilt. Well, as you can see, my sewing room is a little bit of a mess. Moving everything out of the kitchen and trying to stash it in other places has created great chaos, but I digress. Let's look at this lovely rule breaker log cabin block. It was so much fun to make. I ended up making a dozen of them. I've got lots more fabric and I'll probably make more, but I just wanted to kind of start there and see what it was going to look like. And then I realized, there's a lot of color and motion. There we go. There's a lot of color and motion and movement in this block because of all the different fabrics and the way I put it together. So I wanted to not use all the quilt top as those blocks. I was afraid it would get a little muddy. Anyway, I decided I would try to figure out how to do kind of a modern twist with this because, well, why not? I've never done a really modern quilt. And I was like, okay, let me go see what I've got in my stash. The more I can use out of my stash, the happier I'm going to be. And I found two pieces of fabric that got my brain going. This is one, oh, I don't know how long I've had it, but I like using bold colors. And with all of the gradations that are available in these two, I was like, see if I can do something with those. Now, naturally, I didn't have enough of either one of them to do the whole thing. So I decided to put them together. And when you put them next to each other, They are actually very similar, in their brightness and in the dots and in all those things. So I went with it. And then I had to figure out the math. We used to be good at math. I'm not sure when it went away. But I finally did get it figured out, and I'm going to show you some of my scratchings because this may help somebody out there. So I decided, since I was using the blocks that were going to finish at 10 inches, I wanted to stagger them. And I knew with having a 10-inch block, I could easily make rows that are 10 inches wide, which means I would only need 6, and then I would need 80 inches of length to get to that twin size that is my donation size quilt. So it looked pretty simple until I tried to figure out, how much fabric do I have? How much do I need? I did all sorts of scribbling and nonsense. I even tried to figure out 1 yard at a time, how many blocks can I get? Because at one point I thought I needed 10 yards of fabric, and I was like, it's ridiculous. Well, I don't need 10 yards of fabric. What I had forgotten to consider was the number of square inches in a quilt and the square inches in a fabric, with the fabric. So once I got to the square inches idea, it was pretty darn easy to figure out what I needed. But there's a reason also that I discovered why so many people talk about 3-yard quilts. It takes about 3 yards to make either a generous size lap or a twin, depending on how many seams you've got and all sorts of stuff. Once I got there, I was like, easy peasy. Well, unless you forget about your seam allowances. I only did that on one cut of fabric and I was able to use it, but I did finally get it all figured out so that I had enough fabric for seam allowances and everything. So if you were watching carefully, I have some really big pieces I'm going to have to cut. And I had a little bit of a challenge figuring out how I was going to get those big pieces. I mean, 35.5 inches, my workspace isn't big enough and it's already 10 inches wide. But I did solve it, and I'm going to share with you how I solved it. I ended up using 2 rulers. So like for that 35.5 inch, this is my square ruler that's 12.5 inches, right? So again, it takes a little math, but that's okay. So knowing that this is 12.5 inches, I can fold this over, and then with just a little math, find where I would need to cut this to make it 35.5 inches. It's using both the markings on my mat and using this extra ruler. But once I got that all figured out, it was actually pretty darn easy to get those big pieces cut. I mean, I had 2 of them that were 35.5. I had one here that was 50. So I had to kind of figure out what to do with that. I actually ended up not using that. I split the distance between the two. But yeah, it was a lot of fun, even though it made my brain kind of go a little berserk. Anyway, I want to show you the final layout because I think it turned out really well. Here it comes. Well, there it is. I've got it up on the design wall. It's bold, isn't it? A little bit moody, maybe? I don't know. It's not a quilt that everybody would like, admittedly. But I really like how the black and the dots don't take away from these blocks. These blocks are bright and bold, and they stand on their own. They're really unique. I've never made a modern quilt like this. So this was just so much fun. And I used like 3 yards out of my stash just to get this. And I've still got plenty to make my binding and all. Can see more of these in my future. Not all of them with black because it's not for everybody, but there's a time and a place for it. So be bold. I sure hope you've enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.